All right, so welcome back, everyone.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Today we're diving into a Hollywood scandal that seems like, well, everyone's kind of buzzing about it.
Oh, yeah.
This legal battle between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni.
Right.
And you probably recognize those names from the film adaptation of Colleen Hoover's It Ends With Us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Baldoni directed it. They both starred in it.
Right.
But now Lively's suing him, and her accusations are
Pretty serious.
pretty serious, yeah.
Yeah.
So for this deep dive, we have two main sources.
Yeah.
One is a TMZ article, which kind of broke this whole story,
Mm-hmm.
and then a Reddit thread
Yeah.
that links out to a New York Times article
Okay.
that has even more details than the TMZ article,
Interesting.
including some explosive text messages.
Oh, wow.
So we're going to unpack all of that, and I got to say, it gets pretty wild.
It does. It does.
Yeah.
And I think what's so interesting about this is the contrast between, like, Baldoni's very carefully crafted public image.
Oh.
You know, he's like this nice guy advocate for women.
Right, right.
And then you see these allegations that Lively's making, and it's just like,
Yeah.
really makes you think about how much we can ever really know about public figures,
It really does, yeah.
you know?
Totally.
So to start out, like, Lively's lawsuit claims that she experienced sexual harassment on the set
Mm-hmm.
of It Ends With Us, and that it created like a hostile work environment.
Yeah, and it's not just like she's making these broad statements.
That's right.
She gets really specific in the lawsuit.
Yeah.
You know, like there's like a whole detailed list
Right.
of incidents, and she even like lists these demands that she made to try to improve the environment,
Okay.
which the lawsuit claims that the studio agreed to.
And some of those demands are like
Yeah.
really eye-opening.
Really, really, yeah. Like for example,
Yeah.
she requested that no more nude videos or images of women be shown to her.
Right.
Like no more discussions about sexual conquests.
Yeah.
You know, in front of her.
No more comments about her weight.
Wow.
Like, just think about that for a second.
Yeah.
Like, Blake Lively,
Right.
this huge A-list actress,
Mm-hmm.
is having to formally request these things
Yeah.
just to try to set some basic boundaries. You
Yeah.
know?
It really makes you wonder, like,
Right.
what less powerful people
Exactly.
dealing
Oh,
with.
exactly. If she's having to, like, formally request this stuff.
Yeah, that's crazy. You know what I mean?
And then the TMZ article says that things escalated to the point where, like, a meeting had to be held
Yeah.
to address, like, Lively's claims, and that even her husband, Ryan Reynolds, was there,
Oh, wow.
which I think kind of speaks volumes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Like, she needed that support
Right.
to confront this, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Like maybe she felt like she needed protection almost
Right, right.
to be able to say something, you know.
Totally. And then things take, like, an even darker turn because Lively's lawsuit then claims that Baldoni and, like, his team,
Okay.
including his publicist, actively tried to, like, smear her reputation.
Yeah, you know, and that's sadly something we see all the time with these cases.
Yeah.
Like that kind of retaliation,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it can really have a chilling effect on
Yeah.
other people coming forward because they're afraid that the same thing's going to happen to them.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and this is where, like, the Reddit thread gets really interesting.
Okay.
It links to a New York Times article
Mm-hmm.
that includes excerpts from, like, thousands of text messages and emails
Wow.
that Lively got through a subpoena.
Oh, wow.
And some of the texts are allegedly between Baldoni's publicist
Mm-hmm.
and the studio publicist,
Oh, you should.
with lines like, Baldoni wants to feel like Mrs. Lively can be buried,
Wow, that's intense.
and, like, we can't write, we will destroy her.
Oh my gosh.
Right.
If those texts are real, like that really paints a clear picture of a smear campaign.
Right.
You know, like a deliberate attempt to damage her reputation.
Using, like, false or misleading information.
Yeah.
And in this case, like, it seems like the goal was to discredit Lively.
Right. Before she even said anything.
Right, like, almost preemptively.
Yeah.
You know, so that if and when she did come forward with her allegations, like, the public would be less likely to believe her.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Wow. So that's crazy.
They're pretty intense.
So we have like Lively's lawsuit with all these disturbing allegations, and then you have these potential text messages
Yeah.
that suggest this attempt to damage her reputation.
Right.
But Baldoni's lawyer, his name is Brian Friedman, he has fired back,
Okay.
calling Lively's allegations false, outrageous, and intentionally salacious.
Wow.
Um,
So he's basically framing this as like a PR battle.
right.
Right. He's saying that Lively's making everything up
Right.
to try to hurt Baldoni's career
Yeah.
and rehabilitate her own image.
Mm-hmm. And Friedman also claims that Lively was
Okay.
difficult on set and that she threatened to pull out of promoting the film and that her actions ultimately contributed to what he calls the movie's demise.
So that's a common tactic that we see a lot
Right.
in these situations, right?
Right.
They're trying to discredit the accuser
Mm-hmm.
by highlighting like their flaws
Mm-hmm.
or their perceived flaws, right?
Right.
Like, oh, she's difficult to work with, so, it
Yeah.
must be her,
Right. And some people in that Reddit thread, they're pushing back on that. They're saying that, the movie actually did pretty well at the box office.
Okay.
Like it made almost $350 million worldwide
Oh, okay.
against a $25 million budget. So.
But both Lively and Baldoni's lawyer
Right.
are using the word flop.
Right.
So I think they're probably referring more to like the critical reception
Right.
than just like pure financial success.
Yeah, it seems like the definition of flop in this case might be kind of subjective and tied to like their expectations. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Um,
Now back to that Reddit thread.
right.
Because some of the users are pointing out that the New York Times article actually contains even more allegations
Oh, really?
of inappropriate behavior from Baldoni.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And these are really disturbing.
Oh, geez. All right.
So according to those excerpts, Baldoni allegedly showed Lively a video of his wife giving birth
Oh, my God.
without her consent. He also allegedly claimed to have spoken with Lively's deceased father.
Oh, wow.
And then even entered Lively's trailer while she was breastfeeding or topless.
Oh, my God.
So, like, if that's true, that goes way beyond just, like, a hostile work environment.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's a serious, like, violation of her boundaries.
It's crazy.
And her privacy.
Right.
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 And it's important to note, like, according to the Reddit users,
Yeah.
like, these additional allegations weren't just coming from Lively.
Right.
Like, there were other cast members and employees
Right.
that were backing up these claims, too.
Right. So it seems like we're seeing, like, a pattern emerge here.
Yeah.
Which adds, like, another layer of complexity to this whole thing.
Right.
And I also have to acknowledge that, like,
Yeah.
Lively herself has a history of being labeled as, like, difficult and entitled by, certain media outlets.
It is true that, like, women in positions of power are often subject to those types of labels.
Yeah.
It's especially if they're assertive,
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that, someone's personality
Yeah.
or their past actions or whatever,
Yeah.
like, those things shouldn't be a factor in determining whether or not they've experienced harassment.
Right.
Harassment is a violation,
Yeah.
plain and simple,
Right.
regardless of who the victim is or how they might have acted in the past.
So the question becomes, like,
Mhm.
can someone be both a difficult celebrity and a victim?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
Those things aren't mutually exclusive.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like you could be a jerk and still be harassed.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. It's a lot to consider.
It is.
So we have Lively's allegations.
Right.
We have this potential smear campaign.
Yeah.
Baldoni's denials.
Mm-hmm.
And then the media's portrayal of Lively.
Right.
It's a very complicated situation.
It is. It's very nuanced, and it really forces us to grapple with some big questions about power and perception
Right.
and accountability in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And, I think it's important to remember that there are always multiple layers to these stories.
Yeah.
It's rarely as simple as it might appear on the surface.
Totally.
Yeah. And, what's interesting, too, is that this case is playing out like
Mhm.
as much in the court of public opinion
Oh, totally.
as it is in the legal system.
Yeah.
Right. Like that Reddit thread
Yeah.
that we mentioned is a perfect example. Like,
Yeah.
you see people processing the information, trying to
Mhm.
figure out who to believe. And
Yeah, you see, like, people that are staunchly defending Baldoni,
right.
and then people who are, like, expressing really strong support for Lively.
Right. And it's like everyone's already picking sides,
Yeah.
And that's something we see all the time in these situations, isn't it?
Mhm.
Like this tendency to want to like immediately align yourself with
Right.
one side or the other,
Yeah.
often based on, how you already feel
Right.
about the people involved.
It's like people are filtering the information through their existing opinions of Lively and Baldoni
Exactly.
rather than like looking at the evidence objectively.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that we all have biases,
Yeah.
and those biases can affect how we interpret information,
Right.
even if that information is presented as factual.
Totally.
So we really have to be aware of that,
Yeah.
and try to approach these situations with a critical eye.
Like, one of the things I noticed in that Reddit thread was how many people were really focusing on Lively's personality and like past behavior, and it's like they were trying to use that to invalidate her claims.
Yeah, and that's a dangerous road to go down, like a person's character or their past actions or whatever shouldn't be a factor in determining whether or not they've experienced harassment.
Right.
Like, harassment is a violation, plain and simple.
Yeah.
Regardless of who the victim is.
Yeah.
Or how they may have acted in the past.
I think some people just like have a hard time reconciling the image they have of Lively,
right?
Like the successful, glamorous actress,
with
the idea that she could also be a victim.
Right, and that speaks to the complexities of victimhood and the challenges that can come with reporting harassment, right?
Yeah.
We often have these preconceived notions of what a victim should look like or act like.
Right.
And when someone doesn't fit that mold,
Yeah.
it can be hard for people to accept the reality of their experience.
And like, let's not forget, too, the power of public image.
Right.
And how easily it can be manipulated.
Exactly.
We're talking about like a potential smear campaign here.
Yeah.
Like a deliberate attempt to damage Lively's reputation.
And whether it's intentional or not.
Right.
Like, this focus on Lively's perceived flaws can contribute to that narrative.
Right.
And cast doubt on the validity of her claims.
Okay, so let's go back to the allegations themselves.
Okay.
Lively made like some really specific demands
Yeah.
to try to improve like the working environment on set.
Right.
Like no more discussion of sexual conquests, no comments about her weight.
Right. Like, those requests alone really suggest like a pretty uncomfortable atmosphere.
Yeah, it seems like she was really feeling uncomfortable and like unsafe.
Yeah.
And was trying to like set some boundaries.
And she had to go through these formal channels.
Right.
To try to create these boundaries for herself.
Yeah. Right. Okay. And then like we have the more serious allegations from the New York Times article. Like Baldoni allegedly showing the video of his wife giving birth or claiming to have spoken with Lively's deceased father.
It's like those cross a very personal line.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Which just makes you wonder how many other people in Hollywood have experienced things like this but haven't felt able to speak up.
In this case, regardless of the outcome.
Yeah.
Could have a ripple effect, right?
Yeah.
It might encourage other people to come forward and create more of like an open dialogue about these issues.
And it's also a reminder that things aren't always as they appear.
Right.
Especially in Hollywood.
Especially in Hollywood, where image and perception are everything.
Right.
We can't just rely on public personas or media narratives. We need to consider all sides.
Right.
Look at the evidence and remember that there's often more to the story than we initially see.
So what do you think this means for like Lively and Baldoni's reputations and careers going forward?
I mean, it's hard to imagine this won't have a lasting impact.
Yeah.
Like if Lively's allegations are proven, that could seriously damage Baldoni's reputation.
Right.
Especially given, his image that he so carefully cultivated.
It's such a stark contrast.
It is.
Between like what she's alleging and then his public persona.
Exactly. And for Lively, this could further solidify the perception of her as being difficult or outspoken or whatever, which could, affect what role she gets offered in the future.
Right.
But on the flip side, it could also position her as a strong advocate for change in an industry that's really struggled with these issues.
Yeah, it's kind of a double-edged sword.
It is. It is. Yeah. And it's crucial to remember that this case is still unfolding.
Totally.
We don't have all the facts.
Right.
It's important not to rush to judgment.
Yeah.
Or make any definitive conclusions until all the evidence is presented.
We're just getting a glimpse into like this really complex situation.
This case really highlights the importance of critical thinking. Yeah. Especially now in this day and age, where we're just bombarded with information from all sides. Constantly. And, public images are so carefully curated. Yeah. So we have to be discerning. We have to consider multiple perspectives.
Right.
and recognize that the truth is often more nuanced
Yeah.
than it might initially appear.
Well said.
Thank you.
So we've unpacked the allegations.
Yeah.
We've analyzed, this possible smear campaign.
Right.
We've considered the potential impact on Lively and Baldoni. But there's another layer here that I find really interesting, and it's the role of social media and how that kind of shapes public opinion.
Oh, yeah, that's a crucial part of this whole story, right?
Right.
Like we've seen with the Reddit thread.
Yeah.
Social media can be a forum for discussion and analysis.
Yeah.
But it can also be like a breeding ground for misinformation and bias.
It seems like everyone has an opinion and they're not afraid to share it.
Exactly.
Often based on incomplete information or their existing, views of Lively and Baldoni.
And it highlights a real challenge in this digital age.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how do you figure out what's true in a world that's so saturated with information?
Yeah. It's overwhelming.
It is. You're constantly being bombarded with narratives.
Yeah.
And it's like...
It's hard to know what to believe.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to be a critical consumer of information.
Yeah.
We need to question our own assumptions.
Yeah.
Consider multiple perspectives.
Right.
Evaluate our sources carefully.
It's not enough to just take things at face value.
Yeah.
You really have to dig deeper.
You got to dig deeper. Ask questions.
Yeah.
Be willing to challenge your own biases.
This case is like a prime example of why those skills are so essential.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot at stake here.
Yeah.
For both Lively and Baldoni.
Right.
And the outcome could have a significant impact on the whole industry.
Right. And it's a good reminder that these aren't just like abstract legal battles.
Right.
These are like real people.
These are real people with real lives.
With real lives.
And as we've seen in that Reddit thread,
like
these cases can spark really important conversations about these broader societal issues, right?
Right.
Like power dynamics and gender bias.
Yeah.
And the difficulties people face.
Yeah.
When they try to report harassment.
So as this case unfolds, what are some key things you think our listeners should keep in mind?
I think the most important thing is just to approach this case with an open mind and avoid making judgments based solely on headlines and what you see on social media.
Yeah.
Like, we need to let the legal process play out.
Yeah.
And see what the evidence actually shows.
It's so easy to get caught up in the drama and the sensationalism of it all. Right. But it's crucial to remember this is a serious legal matter with potentially life-altering consequences.
We also need to recognize that there are often multiple truths in these situations.
Yeah.
Lively and Baldoni might have very different perspectives on what happened, and it's our responsibility as informed individuals to consider all sides of the story.
That's a great point.
Thank you.
We should be willing to listen to both Lively and Baldoni, evaluate the evidence that's presented, and form our own informed opinions based on the facts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And lastly, I think it's important to acknowledge the broader context in which this case is unfolding, right? Like, we're in a time of increased awareness about harassment and abuse.
Yeah.
And this case has the potential to contribute to that dialogue in really meaningful ways.
Yeah, regardless of what happens legally.
Right.
This case has already sparked these important conversations about power and accountability.
Yeah.
And the challenges that women face when reporting harassment.
Exactly.
It's a reminder that these issues are still prevalent in our society.
Yes.
And we all have a role to play in creating a safer, more equitable world.
Yeah, completely agree.
It's kind of scary, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Like this whole idea of, public opinion and how it can be manipulated. We've been talking about this potential smear campaign.
Right.
And it just highlights how effective these tactics can be.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially today, right? With social media and everything.
Social media can be such a powerful tool for shaping these narratives and discrediting people.
Yeah.
Even with little to no evidence.
Yeah.
It's something we really need to be aware of.
It's it seems like anyone can be a target.
Right.
Yeah. You say the wrong thing or someone decides they want to take you down and suddenly you're facing this barrage of negativity online.
And it can be so damaging.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's why I think media literacy is so crucial these days.
Totally.
Yeah. We need to be critical consumers of information, especially online.
Right.
Like, we need to be able to identify bias, evaluate sources, and think for ourselves.
It's a skill that I think is like more important now than ever.
Absolutely.
With, just this constant flood of information.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in a particular narrative, especially when it's presented in a way that's like really emotionally charged or plays on our existing beliefs. But we have to be careful not to let our emotions cloud our judgment.
Right.
Like, we need to stay grounded in facts and evidence and be willing to challenge our own assumptions.
So I think in this deep dive, we've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, absolutely.
We examined the allegations in Lively's lawsuit. We looked at the evidence of this possible smear campaign, the responses from Baldoni's side, and even, the role of social media and public opinion.
Yeah, it's a complex story.
Yeah.
With a lot of layers.
It really is.
And it's a story that's still unfolding, right?
Right.
There's still so many unanswered questions.
Yeah.
And it's important that we avoid jumping to conclusions before all the facts are presented.
You saw how quickly people were forming opinions
in
that Reddit thread.
Absolutely.
Even with limited information.
Right. And it's easy to get swept up in the drama of it all.
Yeah, totally.
But I think it's really important to, resist that urge.
Yeah.
To rush to judgment. Like, we need to let the legal process play out.
Right.
And wait for all the evidence to come to light.
So as we're wrapping up here, what's the one thing that you really want our listener to take away from this? I
think the most important thing to remember is that, public perception doesn't always equal truth.
Yeah.
What we see in the media, what we read online, those things are often very carefully constructed narratives.
Right, and we can't just blindly accept the stories that we're being told. Especially when it involves, powerful people and these really complex situations.
We have to be willing to dig deeper, think critically, and form our own judgments based on, a careful consideration of the evidence.
Well said. I think this deep dive, it might have only scratched the surface of this legal battle. But I think it's given us all a lot to think about.
Oh, it has. Absolutely. And it sparked these really important conversations about, power dynamics, media manipulation, and the challenges of reporting harassment.
Right.
And these are conversations that we need to keep having, not just in Hollywood, but in all areas of our lives.
Absolutely. So to our listener, we just encourage you to keep thinking critically about the information that you encounter.
Absolutely.
Especially when it comes to, accusations like these. Like, how much do our perceptions of these public figures really influence our judgments? What's our responsibility as, consumers of media to really evaluate this information carefully? Especially when accusations are involved. These are really important questions to consider.
I agree.
As we're, all kind of navigating the complexities of truth and perception in this digital age.
Absolutely.
So thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for listening.